Hi, my name is Mr. Breslin, and I teach next door to Miss Law. And I've been teaching this stuff for about 32 years, so she asked me to do a little bit of an intro about Beowulf. So starting with this, I'm going to ask you a question. If you had to preserve the memories of our culture, how would you do it? Let's imagine that the missiles are flying and the atomic weapons are coming down, and we're just about done. And you're going to try to preserve things so that they knew we had a civilization. How would you do it? All civilizations end. Roman civilization lasted 1,000 years, but it's gone now. So where would you put those kind of memories? Would you put it on a computer? Look how outdated that computer is already. It's only 35 years around. The floppy disks that go in there, you couldn't even load up anymore. Would you put it on a cassette tape? Can't even find a cassette player anymore. An 8-track, an album maybe, CD. Actually, probably the best way to record anything would be to write it down, old style. Well, Beowulf is the oldest thing written in English. It's under glass in London. If you ever get a chance to go to the London Museum, you can see it occasionally, not always on display. Okay, it's 800 years old. It's the oldest writing we have. And that was probably not the first copies. So it's written in what we call Old English. Now, if I were to send you back in time, you've all had to read Shakespeare, I'm sure. You could be okay in Shakespeare's time. It would take you a couple weeks. Now, they probably burn you as a witch if they saw your phone. But if you could survive that, after a couple weeks, you could probably get around. If I threw you in a time machine and sent you back another, 200 or 300 years, the time of Chaucer, you'd struggle. Okay, Middle English is tough, but you could still recognize a lot of words. And if you saw them written down, you'd know a lot of them. And they did write back then. But if I sent you back to Old English, it sounds like German. Okay. It sounds foreign. There are certain words that we still use, and if you saw them written out, you'd be okay, but they didn't write, so that'd be kind of tough. So do you like succotash? This is succotash. Succotash is a word for lima beans and corn. They look like they have some onions in there too, but that's what succotash is. There's a word for this thing, okay? What's odd about English, this succotash is not an English word, it's a Native American word. English tends to put words together. They call them kennings if they're in use in poetry. But it's a trait of English, not in all languages. So these are compound words. So they're two smaller words, often joined by a hyphen. These are called kennings. These are examples of kennings from Old English. You've probably heard of Norseman. Well, Norseman means North man. They didn't say body, they said bone house. They didn't have the word cemetery. They called it a boneyard. Ocean was a whale road. And we still use some of them, or we use a lot of them actually. Almighty, what do you think that is? Mightier than all. Okay? Think about today's examples. We have football field. Football. We got 3 different words to come up with one word. Telephone pole. Okay? Crosswalk. Cheeseburger. This word here, what do you do when you don't eat? You fast. What do you do in the morning? You break that fast. That's why it's called breakfast. We have words like dawn, but then we use sunrise, where we take 2 words and combine them. Instead of dusk, we go sunset. When I taught overseas, I taught in the Czech Republic, and one of my students said, Professor, jak se to říká anglicky smezlina? And what he asked was, Professor, how do you say in English? Smezlina. Smezlina is their word for ice cream. The problem is, the answer I gave him, he thought I misunderstood him, because when I said ice cream, he said, no, Professor, not the ingredients. What's the word for it? What is the word for smezlina? We have no word for smezlina. We call it ice cream. We do it so much. What do we do when we invent a disc that's floppy? We call it a floppy disk. Okay? Now, some of these you'll see in Beowulf. Instead of bloody, it'll be blood-soaked. Instead of determined, strong-minded. Instead of brave, strong-hearted. Okay? And we have some modern examples. We still do this, okay? Rugrat, pencil pusher, tree hugger, which brings us to another thing that they used a lot, which was alliteration, and we'll talk about why they did that. Let me see where I am here. Let's take a look at how you might order something at a diner. I'd like the grilled cheese sandwich, pork and beans with the mac and cheese, please, ice cream for dessert. Grilled cheese sandwich not only tells you the ingredients, it gives you the recipe. All right, that's English though. Not all languages do this. Pork and beans, that's exactly what it is. Mac and cheese, exactly what it is. And then here are the two ingredients that make that dessert. Okay, so combining these words. We do have a lot of words left over from, or expressions. To and fro, this is to and from. Eke out a living, kith and kin, run roughshod over. And many words we do use, things like king, wife, house, war. Also words like through, draft, night, and knife. Now here's the issue. If you remember being in second grade and trying to spell this word, remember how cruel that was? Oh, come on, right? Got to learn how to spell that. You know, you start sounding it out, T-H-R, through, okay. And then what's going on there, right? Well, they said all the letters. They said it was phonetic. Throga. That's how they said it. Throga. They spelled everything. Knife. Knight. Throft. Okay? So if you saw some of these words written down, you go, oh, he's saying through. Throga. Okay? So why haven't we changed the spelling? Well, it's only been 1,000 years, I guess. But we have a little bit. Don't you go through McDonald's drive-thrus, T-H-R-U, right? Miller Lite, you know, L-I-T-E. With Wendy's late night menu, N-I-T-E. Right? So maybe, eventually. But that's why they're spelled this way, okay? And if it sounded a little bit German, because I'm using the gutturals, okay, we don't use gutturals anymore in modern English. We don't use a Frage, right? That's why when you hear someone speaking German, you want to give them the Heimlich maneuver. They sound like they're choking, right? All right, we don't do that anymore. But it's still in our language, okay, in our spelling. Before we get to bones, so something else you should know about this. So when you read it, you're not going to have it in Old English. You would have to have a PhD in order to read it in Old English. So you'll be reading it in a modern version of Old English, and you're going to lose a lot of the poetry in it. Now, why did they use poetry? Well, the reason why, here's a question for you. Which one do you think came first, music or poetry? Well, the answer is it's prehistoric. We don't know. When things started getting written down, we already had both, okay? But I can guarantee you this. If Miss Law made you memorize this page right here out of this textbook, you would hate her. Maybe you hate her already, but you would hate her more if you had to memorize a page from this textbook, okay? Now, what if she gave you the option to memorize the words to 3 songs or 4 songs? I bet you would jump on that. And the reason why is because it's easier to memorize. Bingo. The time when Beowulf, the story of Beowulf was being told, no one could read and write. This story was memorized, and it's much easier to memorize things that have meter and rhyme and alliteration. Okay? And so that is why they did it. So this is actually called a poem, even though it's pages and pages, it's the length of a book. But it's called a poem because it does have all these elements. Now, you won't notice it as much because it's not going to be read in Old English. Or they try as best they can with the translations. So keep this in mind. The story is probably about 1,200 years old. And it's for the first couple hundred years, no one ever wrote it down because they couldn't. Somewhere along the line, someone wrote it down, and the copy they have now is probably a copy of a copy of a copy. How long does something written down last? 100 years, maybe? Maybe. If it's taken care of really well, a book, right? Then it has to be copied again. Longhand, right? Okay, so we don't know who wrote it down. The author did not invent this. The author simply copied down a story that they were hearing, okay? And that's what they add stuff, and Miss Law will talk about that. So keep this in mind about English. What happened, and I don't have a map here to show you, but you all heard of the Vikings. The Vikings from the north, the Norsemen would attack England. Eventually they realized, wow, England's really warmer and nicer than all the places we come from, and Sweden and Norway, and so they wanted to stay, and when they stayed, they didn't speak English. They came from the north. Well, they married English girls. They spoke English, right? So what do you have? You have someone who doesn't speak English learning English, and someone who does speak English. What does that create? Well, it creates kids who have a very warped sense of English, and that's exactly what happened. Is that what became of our English language was what would happen if you had someone who learned English as a 25-year-old and did it badly and then taught it to their kids. Because that's what it was. These were Vikings who were speaking English to their children, and they screwed it up. And that accounts for a lot of fun things in English, let me tell you. Okay, so it is an accounting of a monster story. It's a great monster story that you're going to be reading. I don't want this video to get too long, so we'll get to the next point here. So we have a lot of burial sites, and we would find bones of these Vikings, and a lot of times they would be in ships, and we didn't really understand exactly what was going on, why they would have their shields. Sometimes they would have gold, and they had their weapons with them and things like that. And in Beowulf, you actually have it explained. So when you come across something like Stonehenge, and you've probably all heard of Stonehenge, we have no idea why it's there. We have no written account. The closest we'll ever get to probably traveling back in time is having this 800-year-old document that tells us why they did some of the things they did, the culture they had, why they believed the things they believed in. Okay, so in fact, not this one, but there's another one. For years and years, they had found the body of a king, they assumed, that was buried with all this stuff. And it wasn't until fairly recently that the sexist archaeologists said, let's test the hips and the DNA of this skeleton. They found out it was a woman. Yes, it was a warrior princess of some sort. There's no written document of it, but she was definitely a woman. And the reason they buried them like that was in great honor. So she must have been a warrior. So how did that work? Well, I want you to know a couple things. You're going to start reading Beowulf. And in Beowulf, a lot of things are described. One of the things described is his armor. And the reason they do that is because it's a big part of who they are. So what happens is if you go out, I'm the king, and we had a great raiding party, and we got everything we want, and this one warrior, he's getting married, and his fiancée wants something really nice, and we ripped this out of a church or something like that, so I'm going to give him this silk thing. That's what he wanted. Another one of my warriors wanted a bag of gold, so he gets a bag of gold. All right, and I have to give out this stuff. In fact, king, the word king means ring giver. Okay, and that's how I keep everybody happy. I got another warrior. He's got 8 kids. All he wants is food, so we got a bunch of chickens, so we give him chicken. But then I have another warrior, and he was the bravest and the best warrior. And so I give him a helmet. I give him the best helmet I got. Look at that helmet. That's something else, right? Also give him the best sword. Why? Because he's the best warrior. Okay? So look at that sword. Isn't that cool, right? And besides that, and this is something Beowulf has, chainmail. Now I know it's only one piece, but how you make chainmail, how many links you have to each one, shows the value of it, and it protects you. It's very important to have good body armor. So Beowulf is described as having all this wonderful stuff. You don't get this because your daddy's rich. You get it because you earned it. So when they see Beowulf with this sword and they see him with that armor and that helmet, they know it's something special. So I equate it to seeing a soldier and he has the awards on his chest, okay? It doesn't matter who his daddy is. You don't buy those. You earn those. So it's the same thing. So when they talk about the armor, they talk about the weapons and things, there's a reason why, okay? Probably a lot more I can talk about. Hope you enjoy the story. Don't get too scared. It is a monster story. And maybe I'll do another video sometime. Peace out.